Kamala Harris from California wants to make put a piece of legislation calling the Wuhan virus. If you call the Wuhan virus from China, if you call it that, you're a racist. So again, the Streisand effect, that's only going to motivate more people to call the Wuhan virus from China, the Wuhan virus from China. But Kamala Harris thinks that's a big success, as if we're actually going to listen to what Kamala Harris says. But having said that, the lock it down or we're all going to die crowd is frequently miscalculated. I've said to you, this important axiomatic truth from the beginning, and it's because I don't want you to fall into the trap simpletons on the left do with their dopey talking points. What's been their talking point from the left? You can't put a price on human life. Not one single life is worth losing to this, no matter what we do. Folks, listen, I'm really sorry, and I know we're monitored by deranged leftists who love to get sound bites and misinterpret them. But if seriously, if that's the way you think, please don't ever become a public servant or a policymaker who would impact the lives of others. Because what you're saying has no basis in reality whatsoever. Are you suggesting, let's go with the first one first. You can't put a price on human life. I don't. You do. I can't make this point to you enough. Human beings put a price on their own lives every day. Please argue. You're free to send me an email. If anything I'm saying here offends you and you think it sounds insensitive, challenge it. I will read your emails. Do you not take your life in your hands if you work in a construction job? Construction is the most dangerous profession in America. Do you know that? There's no question construction workers are engaged in a highly dangerous profession. What about people who clean roofs? It's super dangerous. People fall off roofs. Some of them die. I had a Secret Service friend, woman who fell off a roof, was basically nearly incapacitated for 6 months. People fly in airplanes. There's a danger. It's a small danger, but it's real. We just had a Pakistani plane crash, passenger plane. People drive in cars, which are actually more dangerous overall vehicular traffic than plane traffic.
Yeah.
Why do you do that? Folks, again, I'm not messing with you. I'm not trying to be insensitive. I'm asking you a genuine question. I'd love for you to respond. Why do that? If there is no risk to your life that's acceptable, none, then mitigate all risk, lock yourself in your house, chain yourself up, cook your own food so nobody poisons you. What are you doing over there? What's going on? No, you distracted me. All right. If cook your own food to make sure nobody puts the norovirus in your food or sneezes on your food. Disinfect and boil your own water. You could get sick. There could be a cholera outbreak and you're 5 minutes too late. Why don't you do any of that? Why don't 50% of Americans get a flu shot? The answer is because they don't want to. Because they've gauged the risk. I could get the flu and die. Or I could go to the local CVS or Walgreens and get a flu shot. I don't feel like it. I'll take the risk. I don't put a risk on your life every day, a price. You do. The question is, how much of a price? So when we do things like shutting down the entire economy, which inflicted a massive, potentially generational price, bankrupting potentially tens of millions of Americans, we're assuming the risk has to be really high, right? Again, just using simple logic like we used in the Biden segment. I'm asking you to think rationally. For the Democrats listening, I'm not messing with you. If you're willing to inflict a massive price on your life, like bankrupting your business, you would only do that, correct, if the risk is high. Why don't you shut down your restaurant for, the common cold, the flu, or even down here in Florida? We had a hepatitis, Paula? We had a hepatitis outbreak in Martin County down here. What is it, a year or 2 years ago? They didn't shut down the bit. Why? That could be dead. People died. Why didn't they do it? Because they said to themselves, that's a really high price for a risk that's relatively low. Why did we do none of that here? What's unreasonable about that question? Why was none of that done here? Why was the price risk calculation thrown out the window and we engaged in across the board shutdowns, across the extended ones? I get it initially when we didn't understand the risk. Now we do. Why are economies shut down based on a risk we know to normal Speaking of health, not normal, speaking of anything else. But normally healthy people under the age of 60, the risk is minimal that you will die from this. It's still serious, not a joke. People under 60 have had long-standing health ramifications, but this chance of death is infinitesimally small. Why did we bankrupt tens of millions of Americans? Now so I hope we totally eviscerated that ridiculous talking point. You can't put a price on human life. Your answer should always be, I don't. You do. The governor of New York says that, Andrew Cuomo. Yet he's the governor. I was in the Secret Service. When you take on a high-profile position like that, Joe, wouldn't you agree? I've spoken to you about this off camera. You get a lot of death threats. That's unacceptable, oh, yeah. Joe. What is he doing? No. He's putting a price on his own life. He should resign tomorrow. Change his name. Wear a mask, a Groucho Marx mask and a hat. There'd be no risk. Agreed. No one would figure out where he lives. Change your address, Andrew. Why doesn't he do that? Because he's put a price on his life. He's put a price on his own life. He's willing to accept that risk, and he deems that risk small enough that he's willing to pay the price of being a public figure and accepting the fact that he's going to become a target of some psycho. Not me. He did it. But on this second point, we can't risk one human life. What? Does that even make sense? So why doesn't that apply to anything else? That local example, the hepatitis outbreak they had down here a couple of years ago, the people died. Not a lot, but people died. Why didn't they shut down all of Florida? I'm just asking if that makes sense. If you're a logical human being, well, not one life can be risked. Why didn't you shut the state of Florida down with the hepatitis outbreak? The answer is because the price you would have paid is ridiculous in association with the risk you're talking about. That's why. Now, what's the story that troubled me so much and should trouble you too? Look at the story in the Washington Examiner. The show notes are a must-read today, by the way. Between the Lee Smith article I'm going to get to and this, Bongino.com/newsletter. That is my show notes, the newsletter. We'll send you this every day. Please sign up. Andrew Mark Miller, Washington Examiner. This isn't like a, let me just read the headline because it's a really disturbing story and I don't want to mischaracterize anything. California doctors say they've seen more deaths from suicide than coronavirus since lockdowns. Folks, I don't like to talk about it a lot because I don't like to get too emotional on the show. It's not good. But having, unfortunately, recently and throughout my whole life, been impacted by people, friends, and relatives either threatening suicide or taking and carrying out the act. I mean everything from jumping off buildings to hanging themselves. I mean, did you think about it? Did any of this go through your mind when you decided to bankrupt people, destroy their livelihoods, take away their pride, their dignity, everything, make them wait on food lines? The fact that people are killing themselves, does that bother you at all? Or as I said on yesterday's show when I was very angry, and I'm going to try to contain myself a bit today on this, are you so driven by deranged political ambition to wipe out your nemesis, Donald Trump, that you just don't care how many people hang themselves, shoot themselves, jump off buildings, overdose on drugs, how many businesses are bankrupt, that you just don't care? And if that is you, and you don't want to win an honest election, you want to lock down the economy because you think you'll make political impact on Donald Trump, I'm not kidding when I ask you this. Do you understand how sick of a sociopath that makes you? Can you look at your children and honestly say you're a decent person? One of the more deeply impactful moments of my life was when I thought I was a really good guy in the Secret Service, and I wasn't at times. I did some bad things. And I talked to a friend of mine who was a deeply religious fellow, a nice guy, Fred. And he asked me once, "You think you're going to heaven?" I said, "Sure, I'm a good guy." And he handed me a book by Lee Strobel, A Case for Christ. Changed my life. It really did. Because it made me ask that very hard question. Are you a decent person? And sometimes the answer isn't what you want to hear. If you hate Trump so much that you don't care that people are hanging themselves and killing themselves due to the economic destruction imposed upon by a policy you support now only because it damages your political opponent, there's no evidence these things have worked to curtail this virus at all. You're a deeply troubled person. You need to pick up that book and read it because you have problems way, way beyond politics.